welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. Today with on Danny Vaughn. Danny, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So
Yeah.
obviously, I came into you the your band. The original, Tyketto was the gateway drug into you and your music. But obviously, from there, I've branched out into your solo stuff. And as we were talking prior to the show, you've been pretty busy lately too, with some great projects besides Tyketto stuff, which I thought we could talk about first.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, I mean, one of the things that um happens probably not often enough, but I like it a lot is I'll get contacted by people personally that are either making albums where they want guest singers or they're putting demos together to make an album or just doing a project for themselves for their own love of it.
Right.
And they'll contact me to potentially do lead vocals on a track or lead and backing or co-write stuff with them. And I've gotten a lot of really fun stuff in the last year or two. Some of it may never see the light of day. I don't know. You just got to kind of wait and see. But I love doing that. Provided it's kind of within the realm of what I think is my sphere.
Right.
Um, I've had
So,
I
but
had
so
one.
people can actually reach out to you, right? If they got it on you, the website will be underneath
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So you're open for people
Facebook
to reach
or
out.
website. Yeah,
Okay.
people do it all the time. I had one guy, bless him. He wrote to me from Greece. He said, "Listen, I'm a massive fan. I love your voice. It's just amazing." He said, "I've got this project. Really want you to sing lead on it. I think you'll be great." Well, it's all right. Well, send me the music. Let me listen to what you're doing, and make sure I connect with it, and then we'll figure it out. And I'm not kidding you. He sent me the music, and it was like death thrash. I'm like, have you got the wrong guy? I was like, I can't do that. And he's like, yeah, I know. I just really like you so much. I wanted you. I was like, nah, I'll never
Yeah,
come back from trying that one.
doing that voice is an art into its own. I mean, you know, you've got your style, you've got a sound, and you've got a huge range too. And I mean, out of the gates, your vocal range. I think it's funny. Like early on, you were came across even from the first Tyketto album, even back that. I mean, Wasted. You've always been a very confident singer. Like you owned your range. It wasn't like you were finding yourself as you went. Like, oh, over the years, this has been Danny's voice. Like you came out of the gate in my eyes and ears, owning your voice from the very beginning and using it
Hmm.
as a tool for each album. I mean, you may have seen growth, of course, but I'm saying like it wasn't like some singers and their voices are like in different ranges and pitches, and they kind of move into it. You've kind of had your full palette in front of you from the very beginning, and
I,
I haven't
well,
seen it.
I think a lot of that was all the years put in on the cover circuit,
Right.
in the early to mid '80s, where you learn. I mean, I was in a band called Allied Forces that was very, very good, but in those days, everybody had to be good. You had to cover Dokken, Priest, Journey, Loverboy, Accept. I mean, you were covering everything, and so you kind of discovered what was stressful, what wasn't. If I have any regrets from that period, from the Wasted period, which I really don't, but vocally, it's we were all at that point. If you consider the time,
Mhm.
85, 86, Steve Perry, Jeff Tate, these guys were all in the scene, and suddenly everybody like entered at the top of their range,
Right.
and I'd hear stuff and go, God, I've got to have to do this live. So I think, I've kind of matured away from that a bit, where it's all about showing what you got from the get-go, which is highly unnecessary if you're a singer, if you're an emotive singer. you
Right.
you can do it in bits and pieces. I know there are plenty of singers that I think are just stunning that don't necessarily have that upper top range to suddenly blow you away with when they head towards it. It's not necessary. But in the
No,
80s,
it's fun. It's fun
tons.
though. It's fun, and I think one of the biggest things I think I've heard. I sorry to cut you off. Is on the show is vocally going. Man, if I had one piece of hindsight, I would not have sang in that key at the very end. If I knew I was going to be a
Absolutely.
singer right now, but who would have thought 30 years later, 40 years later, rock and roll was still going to be a career that you could still do. Like everyone
Yeah,
thought it was a lark for 10 years and they had to get a job doing something different that's not musical,
yeah,
and thankfully it's allowed to continue on. But, you
yeah.
know,
No, I mean, I still have to sing that last note in Forever Young every night, and not that it's particularly high, but it's very long. And most nights I'm still able to hold it. Sometimes I got to cheat, get in a quick breath, you know. But yeah, that's just a breathing technique with that, and it happened to make its mark on that song. So you can't avoid it, you can't duck it. It's coming, and of course, it's usually the last song of the night when you're most tired.
but that's live though. You've been singing for a while. I mean, some live singers don't even sound, they can't sing live because they either move or they can sing, their chest, their breathing. It's a whole other world once you get on stage to perform.
Sure,
So the
absolutely.
fact that you're nailing it, 99.9%, you know, if you're not winded all the time, is pretty good, especially from a fan's point.
No,
So
I've been fortunate, for any number of reasons that vocally I've held up. Um, whereas other people are wearing down, but I have a lot of sympathy for that. When people get all up in Bon Jovi's face, I'm like, the man put it out there for 30 years and he
yeah,
toured relentlessly for at least 10 of them. Your voice, there's no human voice that can take that.
he
It just
blew it
doesn't.
out in the early '90s when he was touring, and then he came back and sang and took some time off. And I think his voice will be back again. And I think he just had a tour lately because he has a machine. He's got families to feed. I think he just kind of sucked it up and kept the machine going because you can't cancel dates. Like he had to perform. He knows what he
Yeah.
was doing. I think he kept it going for other reasons besides his voice because he doesn't need to do it anymore. I think he's a bigger picture type of guy. You know what I mean? Look at when he came back when it was happening. No one had done any work for years because of COVID.
Yeah, that's right.
He had teams and crews of Bon Jovi's, like a big family. The way they call it, a syndicate or whatever, the Jersey Syndicate. Those guys hadn't been working. I'm sure if he canceled it, it's more no work for those guys. I think it's more to it because I just think he's a different type of. You know what I mean? Give him some rest. I think he'll come back. He might not be the same, but like you said, he burns it out. But some people can still sing, like nothing. You know what I mean? But I guess the question is, do you have a technique? Because sometimes people are like, no, I did nothing. Like, it's just genetic, or sometimes they're like, yeah, I practice and I do stuff. Do you do anything to maintain your voice, or just it just happens to be?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, I do a small amount of warm ups before shows whenever possible. Primarily, I think it's got more to do with just how I've decided to live my life. I'm a very occasional drinker, like a couple of beers a month.
Right.
Uh, Never smoked. And believe it or not, for me anyway, I went vegan 7 years ago, and my voice got better. It's
Really?
bizarre. I can't exactly tell you why, except that most singers when they're touring, they cut out dairy anyway
Yeah.
because it has a tendency to kind of get in there
Phlegm.
and clog things up. Yeah. So that may have something to do with it. I don't know. I
That's
just know that
interesting.
it worked for me. And there was, when you reach, I'm 62, when you reach, your late 50s and people are going, dude, you sound better than you did 20 years ago. What happened? I don't know. It wasn't anything like I went to find a vocal guru or anything, but that was the big shift in my life.
Yeah.
So I think it has something to do with that.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think because it's interesting, it's become a kind of a topic. I think anybody wants to sing and perform, whether it's a part of a band or their band, or they want to share with a commercial. Any artist that's done something and want to do it, more power to you. Just do it. Have fun.
Yeah.
But it's been a conversation, and I've had people on, and I'm not talking out of turn because I've had them on. I've talked to Don Dokken past month or two about his voice and getting beat up because of his voice. And first off,
Right.
he's like, you know what? He said to me, if you don't like it, don't go to my show. I'm doing what I do. My voice isn't the same. It's been blown out. It's kind of beat up. Been, we're worried. But he's also been known to drink and smoke. So,
Hmm.
it's the balance. And last week I spoke to Graham Bonnet, who's like 75. He is
Yeah, I just
still
did some shows with him.
he is still singing like a monster. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? And he's 75. So it's just a very interesting topic to kind of see like what everyone does because there is no certain thing. Sometimes it's just genetics, I think, Sammy Hagar or something. And sometimes it's your
Yeah,
health.
he's a freak, Sammy Hagar.
Sammy Hagar, dude could
God
still, he
bless him.
could tear the leather off of a tennis, of a baseball still with his voice. He's a monster.
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. I years and years and years ago, I was in LA, and it's one of those places at the time where everybody was,
Right.
and I ended up in a very small um, English pub that was often frequented by Ronnie James Dio, and I had a couple of conversations with him. He was, as you've always heard, just a wonderful gentleman, very
Yep.
warm. You feel like you've been friends for years. And so, being a relatively new singer, I'd only done like this big major tour with Wasted. That was my first big one. I was kind of prying him, it's like, listen, I want to be in this for the long run, like you have. Can you give me some pointers? What do you do for your voice? How do you treat it?
Yeah.
Do you do warm-ups? And he got this kind of look on his face. He looked at me and he went, "You're not going to like this." And he said, "I just walk out there and it shows up." And that was him, one of the
That's
great
funny.
voices.
Well, I mean, it is his voice. And it's funny is I've actually heard similar stories of people asking him that too. I almost want to say it was Dokken too. Somebody says the same thing to him when they were starting out. They asked him the same question. He goes, "I don't do anything. Like it's a mystery. Like everybody wanted to go because his voice was huge,
Yeah,
up until the
it
end."
was incredibly powerful, and expressive and all that. I mean, he was the package. And what's nice is if you can go back and find some of the poppier stuff he did. Um, Butterfly Ball, does that ring a bell? That was a project that Roger Glover did. It was a children's book that he put to music. Look it up, and
I
Dio
will.
does on it. It might be the title track. It might be Butterfly Ball, but you got to hear him sing it. It's just brilliant.
I will. I'll check that out afterwards
Yeah,
because I've heard his other stuff, and he always comes up in topics with different musicians and stuff. And yeah, he's a great, great voice. But once again, he was just a natural, you know. And if he didn't succumb to his health issues, his voice would probably be the exact same today, you know.
yeah, and I think he knew how to treat it overall. I can't remember if he smoked it or not. He might have.
I don't think he smoked. I think he drank a lot of wine, but I don't know because I don't really know in particular. So,
He was a lager man, as if
how
I
was it?
remember. He liked a good British beer.
Maybe that's what the key is. It's a good
I
thick
don't
beer,
know.
a stout. Maybe it's a thick beer. It's not a craft beer. It's a thick beer. It's
Yeah,
like a syrup, right? To coat your throat. I don't know. I think what it really comes down to is some people are just lucky. That's why they live to 100 and they drink Dr. Pepper every day. They're fine. And some people are like just, 50 years old. They're like, can't get out of bed. And I think, but if you increase your odds by taking care of your voice, it's going to help. It doesn't hurt. No one's hurt their voice by taking care of it. you know,
yeah, exactly. That's true. No, I mean, this new Stones album, I
oh,
cannot believe how good Jagger sounds. I mean, 80 years old, and
that's the bar for everybody now. You know
yeah,
that.
it's
They keep
crazy.
raising the bar.
And
The songs are good.
he's more active live on stage than most of us ever were. You
Yeah.
know? So
And
yeah,
it's a
he's
good album.
Jagger's always been a hero. Jagger and Richards are both heroes to me for different reasons.
Right. And but because of the songwriting is still strong. Actually, I think it's one of their better albums. They had albums in the mid
Yeah.
career. That was kind of like, meh, I'm not digging it. I give everybody credit for doing what they do. It's not my favorite. But this album, it,
Yeah, it's
it
got some
is fantastic.
great stuff on it. It
Yeah, I
really
mean,
does.
I was really surprised that they came up with some really interesting stuff with their dynamic. So, as a musician, once again, it's exciting. And let's go back. I want to talk about you did Myths, Legends, and Lies, 218, 219. Your
2019, yeah.
solo. Yeah, okay. Awesome. Let's
Oh, thank
talk
you.
about that because that is something a little different of a collection for you.
Uh, yeah, musically, it's a collection of songs that have been sitting in folders and back pockets, some for 40 years, some were written right before the album was recorded. So it really does span that time period. And it's definitely not a rock and roll album.
No,
And it's a combination of just loads of musical styles. It's great when you can sit and write and not have already had your parameters reduced. And
Hmm.
I'm finding that harder now. I mean, there's definitely talk about a new Tyketto album now that the new lineup has settled in. And I'm really finding it more difficult to start writing for that because Tyketto is this, it's not this. It's like this type of
Right.
music. And so for Myths, Legends, and Lies, there was none of that. I wasn't writing even for an audience. I was just writing for myself, and some of it was blues and some of it was jazz and some of it was Irish trad. And it just kind of went wherever I felt like going. And there's just an immense freedom in that. So when I was making it, there were definitely points where I was looking at the engineer going, nobody's going to get this.
Did you
Yeah.
craft songs though to be like I'd heard the album first and then I heard how it was varied, like the time differences and everything, how you put it together. So, but to me, from an outsider first hearing it, it did not sound like I'm like that feels like a song from back in the day. Like it didn't feel like there's a time difference between the songs. It just felt like it's a collection of eclectic music.
Uh-huh.
It didn't feel dated or not dated. You know what I'm saying? Which is nice. Was
Well, I
that in your
don't.
mind when you did the album to kind of like make sure everything kind of didn't feel it
No,
just
I
felt that
just
way?
think. Well, for instance, if you do a blues song, blues is timeless. You can do a blues song today. You can do a blues song in 1920. Um, Rock and roll, if you're not careful, can date you. Sometimes it's a good thing. You want to do a
Right,
surf rock tune, for instance. That's
right,
going to sound like the 50s and 60s. That's
right.
its whole purpose. Um, so yeah, it's more, kind of perennial styles of music that have been around, perhaps, in some cases for hundreds of years. So you don't really go out of date. It's just it's in a sense it's a smaller audience, I suppose.
I think the time period was sad maybe because the way media is absorbed, not as many people probably heard it. So I'm encouraging people to go out and check it out. It's really worth it. It's great, especially if you don't know what you want to listen to, but you want to listen to some good songs. You know,
Yeah, I
this
mean
this
that's
harkens you back to the '70s. You know what I mean? With like the
thank you. That's
the
exactly.
songwriters, singer songwriters with the acoustic guitar. You just kind of pick up the guitar, like you give them Croce and Gordon Lightfoot. Like you going back and you're just hearing a song with a voice, and the
Yeah.
song draws a picture in your brain, and you kind of get stuck in your head all day. You know,
I got to do the thing about that album. It was such a labor of love because A, the fans paid for it, and they liked it, so job done. But B, because I didn't have to compromise on anything. I recorded it in a studio in Wales that I absolutely fell in love with. And if you know anything about Wales, everybody's a musician in Wales, absolutely everyone, and good. So when I heard a part like this song called Black Crow, and I thought, oh, what would sound great? Just a lonesome cello playing. I didn't have to whip out a keyboard. The engineer made a phone call, and I had a professional cellist named Emma Bryden come right in, chart up the whole thing, and did it. And it's like that's what you want.
yeah.
Same, with the horns, the violins, things like that were added in there that I just love to do. I didn't have to compromise at all. There was no record company to answer to, all that sort of thing makes a huge difference. It was all what I Airbnb'd a like 1800s old miner's cottage that was about 20 minutes from the studio. It's right on
Yeah.
on one of the bays in Wales. And so my morning drive was like 20 minutes past the Atlantic and the bay and all that sort of thing, coming out of this old cottage where miners used to live and work. And it just it's like that the Zeppelin 3 or whatever,
Yeah.
they recorded at Bromure and things like that. It really just set you up for the whole day, and you just thought, I'm going to spend all day making music, playing guitars, interacting with other musicians in this setting. Like, this is just, this is the best. I definitely want to do another one for sure.
And, well, I'd love to hear another one, but I think as a musician, that's perfect because it's like isn't that what all musicians have always tried to struggle from, like to get out there to find a place out in the woods or whatever, or at least some of the band members are like, we need to not be distracted. We need to focus and put our hearts into the music.
I think it depends on what you're doing, and it depends on the personalities involved. A lot of times those out of the way studios were invented, just to keep people out of trouble.
Exactly.
Elton John talked about that when he recorded a couple albums at Caribou Studios, which is up in the mountains of Colorado and all that. It didn't stop them from getting all the drugs they wanted. It
Well, I
just
mean,
kept
yeah,
them interacting with the public when they were high.
I mean more towards the point of if you're a songwriter and a singer or a guitarist or a player, musician, band, and you're trying to craft it, and you got guys that got like driven by distraction or people calling or managers or friends or whatever. Like if you're a little further out, or you got the environment where you can just focus on the natural around you and let the music, you can pull the best out of yourself, obviously, and your cohorts might be a little bit better than they normally are because you don't have to pull them along.
Yeah,
As an artist,
yeah.
it lets you be to the best you can. That's the time you want to be your best when you're going to be on record or vinyl
You know,
or tape or
I've
whatever.
never been hardcore about, all right, phones off, but I always turn mine off. It's like,
Right,
my wife knew and said, you won't hear from me for 8 hours. I don't want that constant beeping,
right.
and all that. And I think a lot of players do that, when it's go time. A lot of the good ones that I know are just like, yeah, I don't need to know, what offers I'm getting for an hour or 2 hours, whatever it is. That helps a lot. I mean, you've got everyone's focus.
I also think, I mean, you're at a point now. You've kind of gotten through the worst of the change over of the music in the year industry. Where like rock went out the window, and anybody who was affiliated with rock was out with the bathwater. When you're like, most people are like, we're just musicians, and you label us however you want. We're still writing songs. That's kind of gone around its circle now. So everyone's just back to being musicians again. It's different without the record labels. You don't need them as much. The more distributors, you kind of have your fans supporting you more. Like this album we're talking about, it
Mhm.
allows you to be a better artist without feeling to have to craft a song for somebody else. You know, to that
Yeah,
point, I
again, it all depends on the genre that you're working in, and I found that, yeah, when things kind of collapsed, 94, 95,
yeah,
for uh, you know, they use the term hair metal. I'm not a fan of that at all. I think I understand why people use it, and Tyketto had it. We had the hair. Guys were all good looking, but we were real musicians,
right.
and I think that's why when we did the second album, Strength in Numbers, there's a diversification on that album. The first album was very streamlined. It was written with, the idea in mind was to write as many anthemic songs as we could come up with, and
It
that
felt like
was
a
the
greatest hits album, is what it did, because like there's like bands back then. Their first album had a couple good songs. Like that album felt like it had 10 or how many songs on it, all big
yeah,
hits. It was written, it was crafted like a great pop album with with metal riffs. You know what I'm saying? It was just
yeah, yeah, and it was designed that way, because we actually all lived together and rehearsed and wrote in the living space. We had this huge space where all our instruments were. Like it was down a hallway, down a flight of stairs. We were kind of the unofficial security staff at a company that had gone bankrupt and had a whole bunch of equipment tucked away in these huge garages that we didn't go into.
you're right.
We lived in the offices of that former company. Everybody had a bedroom, and we would get up, we'd have the communal breakfast, and then down the hallway, down the stairs, and a huge area to rehearse in, that was very, very open and
Wow.
free. And we would spend 3, 4, 5 hours a day, throughout the day, either, because you'd stop and you go, and then somebody go, hey, I got it. Brooke could come out of his room going, I got this riff. And everybody run down the hallway and go back and pick up your instruments. You had that opportunity,
Yeah.
it was it was rock and roll boot camp before that was a thing.
What an interesting setup too. It feels like some kind of space movie. Like you guys are all your compounds. You kind of like that kind of situation. Sounds like a dream come true for a musician,
It
especially
was,
starting out.
it,
I mean, like what
it
a
was
great
unbelievably perfect. And we, none of us officially had jobs, but for instance, Michael's brother, Sammy, who he installed fences all through Staten Island and southern Jersey and things like that. So once in a while, he'd get a big job and he'd say, "Yo, Mike, you want to come make some bucks?" And we'd all go up and do this really heavy labor, and
Yeah,
come back with some money in our pockets and go buy groceries. And so it kind of worked somehow. I don't know, but what it enabled us to do was write "Don't Come Easy" in a rather short amount of time comparative to many other people. And we're pretty tough judges. So there were other songs that were written in that period, and it was like,
yeah,
no, no, that one's not as good as this bunch. And that's how it all came about. So, like I said, that album was very streamlined. Then you get into the second album, which the sophomore curse will always pounce on you because we we weren't ready for the first album to be over. It just was all of a
right.
sudden. And the record company's like, right, time to do a second album. We're like, what? We just did this big tour with Nelson. We had this wonderful overseas experience opening up for White Lion. We were really building momentum. And instead of pushing that, because MTV started turning on bands like us and suddenly our videos weren't getting played,
Yeah,
they were like, we need another album now. And oh, right, okay. That's when you start scrounging a little bit. Now, by no means do I feel Strength in Numbers is a second-rate album. In fact, I kind of like it better.
yeah.
But it is an album where we went, okay, let's show a little off of what we can do as musicians. So there's branching out. There's songs like "Why Do You Cry," which is a really blues song, and has nothing to do with hair metal at all. So we were trying. We were, in my opinion, very conscious musicians and some great players. I mean, Brooke is a phenomenal guitar player that guitar players I meet in England now still talk about how influencing he was on them, which I think is such a
Oh
great
wow,
feeling.
that's pretty awesome. You guys had once again, you're one of the bands that came towards the end. It's like your second album came out right when things got kind of wonky for everybody else. So it didn't matter who you were getting in the undercurrent. But it was a good album. As a lot of
Yeah,
bands put out good albums at the time, unfortunately, they didn't make room for everybody. They could have been room for everybody. But and then but you guys did Shine, and then you guys came back and you did Digging Deep, and then the last album, Reach, was just like probably my favorite since back to I don't know Strength in Numbers. I think. I mean, it
yeah,
it
mine
to
too.
me it just felt like they're all good albums, but everybody has favorite albums, certain things, and because I think they hit you, they resonate differently with you. I think either emotionally or lyrically. A lot of fans is because that was the time they were in high school or college, and that's their years, and that's
Yeah.
why it always goes back to that. Me, not so much. Me, I can think of almost every album I've heard by every band to tell you exactly how it's feeling. So to
Hmm.
me, Reach resonated differently than some of the other ones. But I mean, that's why it's exciting the fact that you guys are still doing it. I mean, but while we're talking, you're saying you think it's harder now for you to write in that vein. You're not just writing songs and saying, this feels like Tyketto. This kind of feels like this might be solo. This might be more of my, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's I think because well, a couple things because of what we talked about earlier, because I'm branching out into musical composition and I'm actually like doing dabbling with orchestral stuff and even hip hop grooves and things. I'm excited by all of it.
Yeah.
Music excites. It's a little hard to just go, okay, rock and roll now, and
You could do
it's
some of that. You could do the orchestra. You don't throw the hip hop in there. We've learned you can't just throw hip hop, rock and metal like that. That's not
yeah,
gonna.
no,
That doesn't
I don't
slide anymore.
mix it all in. I don't want to
I
mix it
know.
all
I know.
in.
No.
And Reach also raised the bar pretty high. If I'm going to follow that album up, I want to feel very, very strongly about the songs that are coming out, and about what we did. So, you kind of have to get in your. I'm having this conversation with the band now. It's like, all right, what kind of album do we want to make? You have to sort of set that goal right there. You can't just start writing songs because you'll get this and that and this and that. Which, for instance, I feel was kind of what held Digging Deep back. There's some great songs on it, but we were very, very disjointed at the time. Brooke was living in Las Vegas and had a very busy, complicated life. He had a new family. Michael and I would go out and try and work with him, and he was so busy. It was tough to get his attention and go, all right,
Yeah.
So there's Brooks songs on the album, there's my songs on the album, and they weren't as joined together as they have been on previous records. So digging deep, we really, all of us worked on that. I'm sorry, Reach, all of us,
Right.
Chris Green, that we all worked together on that. And it's, to me, a much more cohesive album for that reason. So the bar is there and it's quite high. I think Reach might be my favorite Tyketto album. So, it's like, all right, how are we gonna do this? I got some new players, new ideas. So I'm talking to different people to sort of kickstart me. Chris Childs is sending me some ideas, and I'm working with several different guitar players that I love and respect. Just
Yeah.
putting it out there, going, let's try something, rather than. I don't think this is an album where I can keep the whole thing in house. I don't think it's going to work that way.
Well, do you think with the new players like coming in at this level, a lot of the musicians coming to bands now are excellent musicians and they're filling in spots now, and they either a grown up listening to like Tyketto or whatever, and they cut their teeth on the riffs and stuff. So it's part of their natural training. You know what I'm saying? As example. So that could kind of be a healthy thing coming in. Or sometimes they're like, yeah, I like Tyketto, but I never really learned it. So I'm learning the music now for the tour, and that might incorporate that, or I might have my own style coming in, which is different. So I mean, it's like you as the mainstay now at this point. You're like the longest running now, you know,
Yeah.
and you're steering the ship. You're like, all right, well, do you have like bowling? Do you have like bumpers on the side? You're like, all right, this is the realm of Tyketto. We gotta stay in. We can't go too far. Like you're saying for yourself for songwriting, but with everyone else too, you're like, we do need these kind of things in the band for the song.
Right.
You know,
Right. If you're looking at it, I'm the tip of the triangle. Everything else is coming up, and eventually I have to filter out and go, no, this doesn't work. This does, and make sure that we do an album that Tyketto fans will recognize as a Tyketto album and go, oh yeah, great. I want that.
right?
You branch out too far, like you said. If I were to start throwing in, a hip hop groove breakdown section or something, it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
That's
it's
not
gonna be a heart
fun.
attack. I mean, it belongs in different songs. I wouldn't say I don't not like it. It's just not like it would belong there.
Which is why Myths, Legends, and Lies happened, because those were all songs that absolutely, had no
Right.
home on a Tyketto record. Even though we did push it, we pushed it a little bit because, I'm an Americana fan. I mean, from early days, the John Mellencamp stuff, when he started going much deeper into
Oh
his
yeah,
more acoustic roots and things like that. I was like, yeah, that's where I want to go. Springsteen, that
Tom
exploration.
Petty. Tom Petty just kept going deeper and deeper.
Absolutely. Um, so we even touched on that. I mean, with Last Sunset, that was a song that I just wrote one day sitting on the couch because I've been listening to some of the more recent Springsteen stuff and just going, I really just want to try and write a song like he does, and just not think it through, keep it simple, make your message, and I came up with this fun story. And Michael came home and I was playing, and he says, "What's that?" I said, "Don't worry about it. It's just something I'm playing around with." And he's like, "No, play it for me." I played it for him. He's like, "We got to do that." What, are you kidding? It's got nothing to do with Tyketto. He goes, "No, it's going to be great." And we did it, and we did it exactly as I wrote it. We didn't try to rock it up or
Mhm.
add a bunches of stuff to it. We just left it as it is. It's still a live fan favorite.
Well, here's the thing: like when you become the vocals, some guitar, but usually the vocalist, and you've been with the band so long, and you do similar music, it becomes almost like you are the voice of them of Tyketto, obviously. And when you rock out your solo stuff, very similar and just as powerful. So at this point in your career, it's like, people can be like, well, it's just kind of like Tyketto's more of a solo album, or is it a band album? Like, how are you going to kind of try to draw the line between, because you've got some really rocking solo stuff that I love, you know? So, like, to make sure it doesn't feel like it's one or the other, or is it really kind of, you can't do that, divide it? I mean, in your mind, you might be trying to divide it. Like,
Yeah, in my mind, I don't know. I always think I know which is me, which is Tyketto, which is going to be a different project. I always feel like I do. And the odd thing about this one is that normally I got a couple of ideas in the pocket to start off with.
Okay.
You know, when Tyketto wrote, when we started doing Reach, excuse me, I had been experimenting with some guitar tunings for Myths, Legends, and Lies. And I used one of those deep tunings and came up with the song The Run. That was the first one that I wrote. And I went, wait a minute, this could be a Tyketto song. Hang on a minute.
Hmm.
You know, if we start it light and then bring it hard. So that was the big testing point. I sent out the acoustic demo to the guys, and this was the relationship I have with Michael Arbini, was that he always knew what I was thinking, and he always knew when to push, when to pull. You know, he was a great arranger, even though he, you know, couldn't tell you a C from a D flat, you know. Um, but he understood a fan's response to music better than anybody in the band. And so he immediately was like, "Oh, I see where you're headed here." Threw some drum tracks down, and then it went to Chris, who we'd never written with before, and I just went, "This is the make or break." And what Chris came back with was pretty much everything that's on the record. It was just perfect, and
Oh,
that's when
really?
I knew, okay, we're game on. We're gonna do this. But that was the first time in Tyketto's history that songs were written occasionally from the bottom up. In other words, I threw the gauntlet to Michael and said, "Listen, you and Chris come up with some beats and some riffs."
Yeah.
We'd never done that before. Normally, we'd done it from the top down, melody, chorus, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, some of the stuff that's on Reach was me having to work around these, you know, fantastic riffs and things that the guys came up with, and cool beats and all that. This will be the new album, you know, God willing. The new album will be trying to write it more in the vein of the way Don't Come Easy was written. You know, find that chorus, find the lift, and
Yeah.
then build around the lift. You know, that's something that a lot of people don't factor into, including people that are in my business, that songwriting has a particular art to it. You know, you're trying to tell a story in 3.5, 4 minutes. Not easily done. You know, in any strip. You
Yeah.
know, pop music doesn't matter. You know how pop it is. I was just listening to, you know, it's Christmas time. I was listening to that Mariah Carey track. Walk away from the fact that you've heard it a billion times. It's great. From a songwriting perspective, that song is great. You know, ba 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 ba, really clever stuff, but all packaged in a way where you just put it on and let it flow. You know, Billy Joel had that genius.
Yeah.
His melodies were so powerful that you didn't get distracted by how complex some of his chord changes could be. You know, which sometimes that can mess you up. You know, if somebody gets too busy, you know, unless that's where you're headed. You know, if you're going to listen to a Yes album, then by all means,
Right.
throw every the book at it. You know, but if that's not what you're listening to, it's hard to craft a pop song. It's not easy work.
Well, and now you've got, well, you know, it's the first time you're doing an album now without Michael, actually. So, you know, that's gonna be your newest challenge too, you know?
Very much so. And it is worrying to me, not from the aspect of whether or not Johnny D will fill the shoes. I'm not worried about that. Um, Michael has just always been my right arm, or I his, however you want to look at it.
No,
And
right.
I've never cut vocals without him being in the room since the band started, because he always had a better sense of my capabilities than I did. So he would, you know, we'd do something and it would come out, and I would wait, because if Mike said, "I think you got a better one in you," I would never question it. You know, never say, "No,
Yeah.
that was it, dude." You know, it's like, all right, let's see what happens. You know, and so yeah. The good news is that, you know, I'm almost in daily touch with him. So I get a feeling like as I'm writing songs, I'll be sending them to him. You know, and just, what do you
I,
think? You know, give me your input.
yeah, I think that's good. I think I support the band going on. I mean, it's a great band, and you know, new musicians can bring in new blood, make it more fun, especially if somebody can't do it for whatever reasons, whether they can't do it, they don't want to do it, whatever. You know, every band. So that's great. But you're at the crossroads where the band is you the dynamics changing for songwriting, and people are gonna be like, well, how is this not a solo album compared to a Tyketto album? Because now, the only one left is the singer, you know,
Yeah,
who
that's the
does solo
challenge.
albums that rock out. So fair or unfair, that's just where you're gonna be at. I mean, I think it's gonna be good either way. I don't care either way because I just like music. But to call something, people are very particular about names. Whether it's go online and watch all the name battles from all the bands, like who's being called what, who's the original number of what band. You know what I mean? Some
Yeah,
bands don't have any original numbers, and everybody freaks out. I'm like, I don't know if they sound like them, and people are going and enjoying the show. The world's on fire, man. Just let people enjoy their music. But
yeah.
for some
No,
people, the devil is in the details, and that will be, you know, that'll be more the challenge in people liking the album. I think. You know what I mean? Feeling it's a Tyketto album as opposed to feeling like it's a good album. Just that weird line.
yeah. Well,
You know,
yeah, that's my goal. I got to walk away from it going, this is a good album, and then let the chips fall where they may. You always do battle. What you said earlier is really important. When the first album for most bands is almost never overcome because that's the discovery album.
yeah, it's
You
all
know,
emotional.
Van Halen 1, I mean, it's like, what the hell is that? I remember where I was when I heard that and just
Yeah,
I didn't believe that was a guitar. You just thought, no, nobody can do that. Um, and so I think, even though they went from strength to strength, that was always going to be the bar as far as many fans were concerned.
yeah.
I don't think Van Halen 2, I think it got slated a little bit in comparison with Van Halen 1. Diver Down got slated for being 28 minutes long or whatever it was and half cover songs. I love
Right.
that record.
I do too. That was my first Van Halen album that I owned. Actually, was Diver Down on cassette.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, your first album, there are just some people that are never going to like anything
No.
better than your first album. And you just live with that.
Well,
It's,
yeah, I don't think you should change your thought. I'm not questioning you as like how are you going to prove it? Because I don't think you have anything to prove. I don't think any musician has anything to prove to anybody. It's just a question of
what we do.
well, you have nothing to prove. You're a
Oh,
musician. You sing.
well,
Well,
man, listen, it's call and response. Always. Always. You don't think Pete Townsend feels the same pressure whenever he writes a song? I guarantee he does.
I think with you, but not with the response of the people. Like if you walk away from it before anybody else hears it, you go, "I feel proud about this." I hope everyone else likes it too. Is what I'm saying. Whether
Yeah.
people like it or not doesn't matter. I'm saying you have to like it, and that's it. You don't have to nothing to prove to the people anymore. There's nothing to you don't have to. It's just about you put out a great piece of music, and that's it. You know what I mean? I was just kind of curious what was in your mind if you're like, I'm not even thinking about it, or I am kind of trying to do this. It was more like what your mindset is crafting the album than what people expect of you. It's really, where I was getting with that because, it's
Yeah.
just
Again,
a mindset.
I'm trying to narrow the field down now. There's no point in going into it and going just, and telling everybody, just send me everything, and we'll weed it out because, you can't do that with really versatile guitar players because, they're into everything. And so you might get something, you get a Cannibal Corpse riff. It's a great riff, but it ain't going to work for Tyketto. So,
No,
I don't want time wasted there. Um, and also, again, I don't want to say officially, but we're really kind of looking over our shoulders, looking at Don't Come Easy and going, what can we do along that line without pandering to it, if that makes sense?
no, it does.
You
I mean, it's your
if
sound.
I make an album where all the choruses are whoa,
Yeah,
whoa, okay, fuck that, yeah. Now you're just digging for gold there. So it's not that so much, but trying to find the elements of what made that album special and seeing if I can potentially bring it into now and see what happens.
that would be fun. Do you think so? You think like in the next year or so? I mean, you the band you've had time for the band. I like the fact you guys waited and you played and you toured and you've worked with musicians before you did the writing and stuff. Because sometimes bands will get together with the new lineups and they go right in the studio with a new guitar player or something, and you're not used to working together yet. So the fact you've had time working together as a band live, then you go back, you kind of know each other's chops, you know, what I mean, you have a better idea when you're working on a song, I think.
Another reason that Reach sounds the way it does is because we did 2 or 3 weeks worth of dates and then went straight into the studio. So the band
Yeah.
had, it was everybody kind of knew each other's moves at that point. So I'm hoping we can do something like that. I don't think we'll have anything new for next year. I think it'll be 2025. But the record company is definitely banging on my door, so I don't have a lot of choice.
What about between then? So what some soul stuff? Because what about so you just did Snake Oil and Harmony. I just want to touch about that real quickly because that was kind of a cool thing too. That was neat. So Dan Reed, so how'd that come about? It's kind of a cool little combo there. They wouldn't expect. I didn't see that
Dan,
coming.
Dan and I met. I mean, it's a strange thing that we'd never met until I think it was 2014. It's we knew a lot of the same people. We miss each other in passing, very aware of each other. And I had this idea, not my original idea, but two of my favorite songwriters, and they still do it once in a while. John Hyatt and Lyle Lovett will go out together and play, and they take turns playing their tunes, and they'll talk and tell their stories and all that. And I wanted to do that with, our people. So, I was talking to people like Tony Harnell and Jeff Scott Soto and different people. And, everybody loved the idea, but it was always, well, I got this and, Trans-Siberian Orchestra that, and, have my people call your people. And just nothing was, I couldn't get anybody to commit. And I met Dan at Download. Dan Reed Network and Tyketto played the same stage at Download that year. And just kind of, was so happy to meet him, and he was very, very warm, and we sat and chatted a lot, and I just threw that idea at him, and he went, "I'm available April." So I was like, "Okay, we're gonna do this." And what was nice is in our, we only rehearsed a couple times, but we each gave each other like 3 or 4 of our songs for the other to get familiar with. But the idea was, that he just said it first. He just said, listen, you hear anything while I'm playing harmonies, another guitar part, just do it. Just don't even hold back. That's what it's all about. And so we had a nice magic going there. We get more familiar
Yeah.
with each songs as shows would go on. And so that made it very, very interesting. The storytelling was very interesting as well between the two of us. He's lived a rather remarkable life, which I felt, kind of made mine. I thought I was pretty well traveled and interesting. And then you're telling your story about Ronnie James Dio and, the time I toured with Iron Maiden, and he comes back with, so when I met the Dalai Lama, and you're like, oh, fuck, come on, Dan, how are you going to beat that? But we had a great time. So eventually we done like 2 tours, and people started pressuring us going, look, why aren't you doing songs together? So we did a kind of a test run with a song called Where the Water Goes that we wrote together. And it went over really well. So yeah, we made the record. We made it in Prague, which is where he lives. And it was one of those things that got done in between projects. It's like, just finished this tour, just doing that. Okay, meet you in Prague, and off we'll go. And yeah, it's a good little record. There's some good songs on it. I wouldn't know exactly how to classify it as far as what kind of music it is.
I would need a singer songwriter. Probably the
Yeah,
same part of
yeah,
the store I put myths would be. I mean, I don't. You really can't label it.
Hmm. Now,
So
Dan now gotten. I mean, that was another thing that. So we were going to tour that album. It was all set up. March 2020, first show, London. I'd gone to London. I'd done 3 solid days of press, both for that album and Myths, Legends, and Lies, which had only come out a little while before that. I hadn't done that in a long time, so there was a lot of genuine interest. And then on the day of the first show, when Dan's supposed to fly in, my phone rings at about 7 in the morning, and he says, "Listen, they're canceling flights to and from England. You need to get out of there. We can't do this. Because up to that point, like COVID, was it hysteria? Was it real? We didn't, and all of a sudden, boom, it was happening.
Everything locked down. Yeah.
Everything locked down. And I did get the one of the last flights out. I live in Spain. So like 2 days later, there were no flights between Britain and Spain after that. So who knows what I would have had to do if I hadn't gotten out. So the album never got toured. It just both those records, COVID kind of shut down any momentum they would have had.
So it was open to there's still a tour and you guys to tour that album, and then keep it going occasionally to do that. You know what I mean? Like it's open ended, really. Such a great
Well, it
partnership.
is, but Dan's kind of moved on to other stuff. I mean, as part of what we are talking about, in COVID, he really, in order to, as we all did, to keep ourselves from going crazy, he filtered back into painting, which was a skill that he had years and years before, and it's gone rather well for him. And he also has been involved, apparently, in making an independent film, which I know very little about, other than I believe it's a science fiction. So music is not really on his table right now. It's just, I don't know if he'll come back or whatever. But in the meantime, the idea is there. As far as Snake Oil as an entity, doesn't have to be us two. It can be,
Yeah.
two other people. So I'm still talking to some friends of mine about that. Where I'm going to wedge that in my life, I don't know just yet. So
It just seems like it could be a fun project, even if it's every 5 or 10 years. Like, just seems like something you could for a summer run. Just you know what I mean? Just feels like it's a fun idea. The concept just seems too good to let just die. You know,
yeah, I agree. And it's just
it's just making it work.
making it work, finding those just the right personalities where, you know, when you're doing shows where it keeps things fresh.
Okay,
You're not just repeating what you said yesterday and all of that.
well, that's the challenge. So, to the fans that have to wait for the album, though, you will be out doing stuff this year, or actually 2024 is this year as it comes out. Tyketto actually is having dates added on quite a bit. It seems like you guys are picking up a lot of much more speed than normal.
It's one of the upsides of the changes. I mean, and we should say for anybody that's interested, one of the things I'm most proud of about the change in Tyketto was that it was done with zero drama. There's no dirty laundry. There were no fights. Again, COVID kind of gave everyone a chance to sit back, and Michael and Chris both independently came to the conclusion that they just didn't want to tour anymore. That they the parts of their home life that they were missing. Chris in particular, because he's got a young son. Michael's son is a little bit older, but
I'll be honest with you. After talking to Mike and him saying that many months later, it
uh-huh.
makes sense by him talking about how busy he was and how much else stuff he did, and the
Yeah.
amount of work he had to do to keep his chops up. I mean, he's a hard worker, and he
Oh yeah.
expected nothing but the best. So he would be practicing 3 months before that even like. So he put the effort in way before anything else. So
And he was also the business manager, so he
and
was
the
dealing with all
manager, and he
that.
has others. Yeah, he has other businesses. So, I mean, he was just flat out. I didn't know when he slept. So hearing that, I was like, well, it does kind of make sense. That it's not a problem. It just feels like it's just there's only so much, and you do
I
get
think it
older.
was I think it was the hardest decision he's ever made in his life.
I imagine
And
it was.
he made it for all the right reasons. And again, we talk almost every day, and there are pangs of longing, but he still knows within his heart that he made the right choice.
Yeah,
Um, and he'll always be, like I said, he'll always be a presence in one form or another. And that was the beauty of it, was that in the transference of the personnel, Chris and Harry are good friends. So Chris was helping Harry, showing him how he did things, how
yeah.
it worked on life and all that. Johnny told me, is it okay if I get in touch with Mike? There's some things I'm hearing and I want to make sure I'm getting them right. So it was just great to have that, that open door policy is there for everybody. So yeah, they'll both be presences in one way or another
Right.
on the next record for sure.
As a fan, it's nice to hear that, though. It's nice to hear that there was nothing to hear. It's nice to know because
But
you hear they're passing the torch and they're working together, and knowing from when I talked to Mike how he felt with the band, it was just nice to feel like, oh, it does feel sad because it's like life and you get older, but there's no drama. It was just like continuing on what you love. You built this up, so you help supporting it. Just because you can't do it this way, you want to be part of it. You know,
Yeah.
so that
After
kind of
after
helps it feel like this is a band still. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like it's
after
a
going
project.
through the, we all had to deal with that Motley Crue nonsense and the Ace Frehley nonsense. If they don't give me what I want, I'm gonna reveal something about Paul that'll end his career. It's like it's a little late, Ace. His career's 50 years old and he's retiring. What are you gonna do? It's
Nothing's gonna and was gonna end their career anyhow. They were gonna keep going. They were
yeah,
the
of
juggernaut.
course not. It's just
If Phantom of
nonsense.
the Opera didn't end their career, nothing was gonna end their career. For the
Yeah,
Elders,
that's right.
they proved that nothing can stop them. Phantom of the Opera, you
Well,
know.
that and I was made for loving you. If that didn't kill them, nothing will.
Right. Well, at least yeah, the pop sensibility of it. I think it's yeah. Actually, they wrote a song with Desmond Child. I think Desmond wrote that with Paul. But I don't know if Paul. When I talked to him, I think Paul also owed a song to Desmond. They're supposed to like write songs together and flip flop them. That's what Desmond was solo artist, or he was doing his
Yeah.
project. I think Paul also owed him a song. I think I could be wrong, but we're doing that one because they kind of flip flopped. Yeah, I think it's better and it's healthier like it is because then it will feel like it's a band. It's easier to feel like it's a band project because it was passed on. It's a band. It's not totally different. Um, but
We've
you
we've
are touring
we
now,
spent
which is
some time
good.
doing some shows, and like you said, I mean, I've got my whiteboard up here. We've already got, I think, more shows slated for next year than we had last year, and part of the gift of that is that Tyketto is now a firmly European-based band. I don't, there's always expenses. I love ask any musician what their biggest pet peeve is, and they will tell you that
US US visas,
it's
right?
that's when you announce tour dates, and the first 10 comments are, "Why aren't you playing here?
Oh,
Why aren't you coming here?" And it's like, do you have any idea how hard it is to find openings in the same country? And but I no longer have to, have the consideration of having to fly two people from America to get over here. So if a gig in Sweden comes up, it's doable because,
yeah,
we're Tyketto, we're not Kiss, we're not getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a show, nowhere near that.
no,
So everything's a budget struggle, just to break even. Never mind, making money going home and buying stuff. That's not part of the equation anymore. So I've now got the possibility of that. And also that, both Michael and Chris had very limited amounts of time that they could give to touring. That's
right.
no longer the case, even though, Johnny worked with Doro, Harry works with Chez Kane, we all have other things going, but the schedules are much more open. And so things are popping up left and right. I'm like, oh, hey, anybody want to do this? And yeah, let's do that. Okay, boom, we're on. So that's a happy place to be. We last year was the longest. I think if you count where we started at the Monsters Rock Cruise in April, our tour was 6 weeks because we ended in the first week of June.
Yeah,
So that was a lot. I mean, that was crazy. Doing the two last shows with Chris and Michael on the ship, getting off the ship, flying to London, going straight into rehearsals with the new guys for 2 nights of rehearsals, and then boom, you're on tour. It's like it's complete trial by fire.
well, I mean that's and the good thing is you'll have this whole year of touring before you go do the next album. So once
Yeah,
again, the continuity of recording an album with a band and the band, everyone will feel comfortable as a band to be working together. Not like, oh, it's new to the band. I didn't want to put my stuff in the next album. Everyone's going to be on the road, for a year. You're going to know each other, and that's it, really. If you don't already now, so definitely it will be a band influenced album. No way around it.
and I'll want to do it the same. That was the other thing when same way Reach was done. The whole band was there.
Yeah,
They was different guys in different studios. That works, and it is usually financially motivated because it's just really hard. There aren't as many great studios anymore because they've all gone out of business.
yeah,
But just putting everybody in the same place for a couple of weeks, and this is your main focus in life. That would if I can't record a new Tyketto album that way, and then I'm not going to do it. So that's kind of a given already.
That's fair. That's fair. But I want to thank you for talking about this great stuff. I mean, you had some albums out I want to talk about. I'm going to catch up on Tyketto, of course, but your other stuff I wanted to talk about because I enjoyed it, in the past few years and hadn't really heard a lot about them, unfortunately. So it was great to talk about them.
Appreciate that. And to be honest with you, I'm excuse me, I'm chomping at the bit to do another solo album. I actually have the songs. Um, so it's just a matter of when, and it's putting the work in. And by that I mean Myths, Legends and Lies was done, we won't go down the whole road of it, but it was fan funded.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of work. And so I would do another album the same way. Because again, I really liked not having to answer to a record company, anybody. So when you're doing that and you're doing all the different things, like, okay, people would buy the album ahead of time, right? You'll get the CD for $15. You send me $15. When I finish this CD, you get it. But then you add it's all the other stuff. It's, for 20, $25, you get your name on the album, all the little goodies.
Right.
Maybe you're auctioning off some old stage clothes, all that stuff. It takes a lot of prep and a lot of work. And I'm very lucky. I've got people helping me with that are awesome. But I have to sort of, I have to take a lot of deep breaths before I'm ready to do that again. Because it is obsessive. It takes up your whole day
Yeah.
until you're in the studio doing it.
It'd be awesome. I think everyone's going to dig it. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, obviously, when you're in a good spot to do it, it's a time to do it. Um, People check out under the show. Usual the links could be the band and Danny's solo website too. Really, your website for all the other
Yeah, and
stuff.
all the stuff we're talking about is on there.
Yeah.
There's not as much physical product as there used to be, but everything's available for a digital
Yeah.
download like that, so people can check out song by song if they want.
Because there's some good stuff. I encourage people to check out all the stuff you're talking about tonight too, because it's some really good stuff. But thank you, man. I appreciate this. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, my pleasure, Sean. It was great.
We'll speak again. Maybe we'll talk when you're ready for the next album, and we'll break it down.
Yeah, anytime. Be a pleasure.
All right. Thank you for being on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Okay, you take care, man. It's good to meet you.